are governors that are working on filling the void in leadership that the president left for them. States on the country's east and west coasts are forming regional pacts to coordinate reopening society from the stay-at-home orders each has issued. The first announcement came yesterday on the East Coast, where New York Governor Cuomo said his state, along with New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts, each plan to name a public health and economic official to help with the reopening plan. Each governor's chief of staff will also be a part of the group. Later in the day, California, Washington, and Oregon also announced they would be joining forces to plan to ease stay-at-home restrictions. The group said they will study data and research from other countries in order to come up with a consistent plan. Wow. Well, I mean, the governors made their announcements just hours after President Trump declared on Twitter that it is his decision to decide when to open up the states. Wonder if he heard about these councils that are being set up and just felt very left out, adding that he is working closely with the states and that a decision would be made shortly. Then came the president's coronavirus press briefing. Wow, the longest and most combative to date, where he lashed out at the press, disputed reports that he was slow to respond to the pandemic, and then defended his claim to have broad executive authority over the states.
What provision in the Constitution gives the president the power to open or close state economies? And then
numerous provisions. We'll give you a legal brief if you want.
It's been states that have closed, ordered schools closed. It's been states that have ordered businesses like restaurants.
That's because
and
I
bars
let that
closed.
happen. Because I would have preferred that. I let that happen. But if I wanted to, I could have closed it up. The President of the United States has the authority to do what the President has the authority to do, which is very powerful. The President of the United States calls the shots. They can't do anything without the approval of the President of the United States. When somebody's the President of the United States, the authority is total. And that's the way it's got to be. The authority is total.
You said when someone is President of the United States, their authority is total. That is not true. Who
Okay,
told
you know what we're going to do? We're going to write up papers on this. It's not going to be necessary because the governors need us one way or the other, because ultimately it comes with the federal government. That being said, we're getting along very well with the governors, and I feel very certain that there won't be a problem. Yeah, please, go ahead.
Has any governor agreed that you have the authority to decide when their state
I haven't
opens
asked
back up?
anybody, because I don't, you know why? Because I don't have to. Go ahead, please.
But who told you the president has the total authority?
Enough, please.
Wow, there was a lot more melting down than we showed you there. None of it had a lot of new information in it or news value.
Well, there was actually just let's be clear. No news coming from the president. Nothing new.
But he was
coming from
very
the president
upset,
yesterday
very
for 2 hours.
out of whack, outside of himself, and angry.
It was a sad display.
He picked on reporters. There was this strange little video
Felt bad
that
for
on taxpayers' dollar, on the White House's time, staff members actually edited together a video where sound bites were taken out of context and graphics were made to attack the media. This is what the president is making his staff do.
You know what made it special?
On coronavirus time.
The sweeping sort of orchestra in the background that you play during campaign. I'm just watching this and I'm going, are you kidding me?
No, this was sad.
It's like taxpayers made a campaign ad for Donald Trump to air at this briefing.
And then his top scientists were sitting there watching this video instead of doing what they need to do to save lives. So let's see. You've got your scientists at your 2-hour press conferences. You won't invoke the Defense Production Act to actually coordinate something nationally and use your power. You won't do that. And then you say it's all on the governors. So the governors step up. They step up and they try and help. They step up to fill the void in leadership that you left wide open and that you told was on them. And now you're freaking out. This is truly pathetic, but sad for Americans who are struggling through this, who need so much more from the President of the United States and the White House, the people in the White House who work for him. Carol Lee, is there any information that you have heard as to what was behind this beyond the obvious, the governors outshining the President of the United States?
Well, part of it is that what the president is saying really fits what he wants his agenda to be, which is to open the economy. And what was so remarkable about yesterday is that for weeks, when governors were not issuing stay-at-home orders across their states, and there was concern and there were calls for the president to issue a national stay-at-home recommendation, not even an order, the president was saying he didn't have the authority to tell the states what to do. And yesterday, and this was just a week before his press conference, I asked him this question, and he said, well, I don't, it's the Constitution. It's the Constitution, but I can't do that. And now we see him yesterday saying that he has absolute authority to tell the states what to do. And really, what he's trying to do here is, and we've seen this before, is bend the Constitution and use it as an excuse for what he wants to do, whatever that is. Before it was that he didn't have the authority. Now that it is that he has the absolute authority. And what we've seen, as you guys have been talking about, is that while he was saying he couldn't come in and tell states what to do, he wasn't going to issue a recommendation, not even an order, that they issue stay-at-home orders, that states took it upon themselves to basically cut him out, and he's not part of that conversation. And now he's in the situation where he desperately wants to have some sort of economic opening beginning on May 1st, and he needs governors to do for him what he actually doesn't have the authority to tell them to do, because he's so determined to have some sort of economic opening on May 1st, because he's worried, frankly, about what this is going to do to his election in November.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.